Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Champagne and JD. I'm Andrew Champagne alongside JD Fox, and we've got a very special guest lined up for this week's show. We are headed to Australia to preview the Friday night / Saturday, wherever you are, card at Rosehill, Australia A, in your ADW of choice. And JD, as always, our guest needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway because that is just the kind of guy I am. He is one of the foremost authorities on horse racing in Australia and Hong Kong. We're excited to have him, and not just because he is a fellow member of the People Named Andrew who work in horse racing and have strong opinions club. Andrew Hawkins is here with us. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's a great club to be a part of, and it's great to be joining you on the show. It's very exciting at this time of year here in Australia. There's so much going on, and can't wait for this card at Rosehill on Saturday, Australian time, Friday night, your time. So let's bring it on, and hopefully we can find a couple of winners.
JD, be jealous. We have meetings every month, and we have T-shirts.
I wouldn't... Andrews around the world, I wouldn't be surprised with some of the Andrews I know.
I'm just saying there's one in New York that acts as our sergeant at arms.
Yes, he does.
Oh, that's classic.
Hi, Andy. How you doing?
Oh, that is fantastic.
All
right. So the way we're going to do this here is JD and Andrew Hawkins are the two foremost authorities on Australian racing on this show. I'm just sort of along for the ride up until we get to the Quaddie because, it involves wagering, and JD finally cashed a ticket last week to, at the very least, get into the race between us here. But as you may remember, I had a couple of really good days in Australia earlier this year. Really excited for the Quaddie, and I'm looking forward to diving in on that. But first, some big news out of Australia this week, the retirement of a horse that a lot of American fans have heard of, Te Partiro. She won a couple of stakes races here in the States, went down to Australia, made a big impact down there. JD, Andrew, take it away.
Yeah, really, obviously the former Wesley Ward runner in the States not only ran in the U.S., but also won a race at Royal Ascot, Andrew, and, came to retirement early in her career. Tried as a broodmare. It was not successful. Took a little bit of a break. Ended up in a Group 3 race in Scone and won it, I wouldn't say easily, but got up in time and then had a pretty successful Australian career. Of course, this past season, earlier this year, winning 2 Group 1 races and really kind of emerging on the scene as a big-time horse in Australia, Andrew.
She became the best mare down here. Obviously, that was a division that probably wasn't as strong as it had been in years gone by, given Winx's retirement. But look, she had done an extraordinary job. I think in her first season when she was down here in Australia, she did win that race at Scone, but she just struggled for form a little bit at times. And I think they've just had some niggling issues with her throughout, which I think is the reason that she's been retired now officially. But she did have that one retirement call made early. She was going to the breeding barn. I think that they'd be glad now that she didn't get involved because obviously she got those 2 big wins earlier in the year in the Coolmore Classic and the Queen of the Turf. But you have to think about her in a historic sense as well, because not many horses would be able to have won at Saratoga, to have been able to win at Royal Ascot, to have won a Group 1 down in Australia. Like, that's a really prized CV for a potential broodmare prospect, and I'm sure that there'll be plenty bidding on her when she goes through the sales ring at Keeneland a couple of days after the Breeders' Cup, even though she won't be obviously racing there now.
Yeah, and she was going to end up at the Breeders' Cup anyway, was the plan, is they wanted to import her back to the U.S., I think, for a final run and then the sale. But obviously the final run's not going to happen. Reportedly a knee issue. Don't know if there's more to it than that. But obviously it was a disappointing effort in the Winx. Obviously a lot of punters favored, and I mean didn't lose by much, but finished 5th. Probably not the result most thought going into that race, which of course was won by Very Elegant. So excited to see Te Partiro and what will happen. From a price standpoint, I'm really curious as to see what the market's going to be based on the fact that she was unable to I always struggle with this. I'm just going to use euphemisms here. Unable to get knocked up. I mean, there's no better way to really put it. as Champagne shakes his head. But,
Barren is the word you're looking for,
I know.
JD. Use a dictionary.
Or a thesaurus.
That too.
I'm too busy picking winners here, Andrew. I don't know.
Well, it's about time you started.
And that's the way this show goes, Mr. Hawkins. So I'm really interested to see, and obviously Gay Waterhouse and Adrian Bott did a great job. The Australian connections, they really wanted to find some right spots for her, and hopefully they did a good job in getting her pumped up a little bit, and hopefully she brings a lot in sales. So kind of an interesting situation going on in Victoria. Obviously, the 2-year-old season just underway this week in Australia, and the first races at Flemington. Kind of an interesting situation based on kind of the ban of trials right now in Victoria. So the runners, the 2-year-olds, are very immature at this stage because they have not had a chance to really train on track. But before the first race at Flemington, they allowed the horses to do something very interesting last Friday for those local to the grounds, Andrew.
Yeah, so the way it works in Australia, for those that haven't seen before, is that barrier trials are a crucial training element. A barrier trial is essentially a mock or a faux race that just allows a horse to be somewhat under race conditions, but not necessarily tested. There's no requirement to try. It's not for any prize money, but it's purely used as a training mechanism. Now, it's always been interesting between New South Wales and Victoria, which are the two biggest states in terms of racing in Australia, because New South Wales requires every horse to publicly trial before they race. Victoria has never required that. And so New South Wales will have a couple of stakes races next weekend for the new 2-year-olds, and they will have had to have publicly trialled. There was a big trial session earlier this week. In Victoria, they don't have to do that, which is why when they had a race for 2-year-olds earlier this week, none of them had been seen publicly. But the thing is, at the moment, there are no trials in Victoria, period. So with Victoria, they have been having jump outs for horses who are trained at each of the tracks. In Australia, it is far common, more common than not, that horses are trained on track, are stabled on track. And so horses who are in Victoria, who are trained on track, get the chance to trial or unofficially trial, which we call jumping out, or a jump out. They've been able to do that. Now, this race at Flemington, the thing that was really interesting was that the Flemington course, the Flemington Straight, is quite different to many other tracks around the country. In Victoria, there aren't many straight courses, so it did provide an opportunity for those that were trained on track at Flemington to have a look at the course, which those that weren't trained at Flemington didn't have the opportunity to do. So I saw Graham Begg, who won the Spring Preview, which was the race run earlier this week. I saw him upset that he wasn't able to give his runner a chance to see Flemington before she raced there. It definitely seemed to be of benefit, and it's no surprise perhaps that the winner of that race was a Flemington trained horse. So I think that that's going to be seen a little bit more in the coming weeks, especially with more of these 2-year-olds starting to step out. You'll see horses who race in the debutante at Caulfield in a few weeks. They will, the horses that have been trained at Caulfield probably have an advantage over those that haven't. But Flemington in particular is the one that really is affected. So it was quite interesting to see. We'll see what happens going forward. But just due to COVID at the moment, that's the reason for that trial situation there.
Yeah, Flemington, a unique and beautiful track. And for those who pay very close attention to this show, Flemington is the track featured in the open of our show. When we have the Quaddies come up, and it's a beautiful aerial shot that we licensed of Flemington just because I love that course so much. We've gone about 3 months. Actually, it was June, so a little more than 3 months since we last looked at the Everest market and the potential runners for the upcoming Everest, the largest purse race in Australia. And I will say that I spent a lot of time last time we were on this, Mr. Hawkins, talking about loving Gabby, who of course has since been retired. So we've got to kind of update the look at the field and the pricing and kind of give people an idea of what the market is and who some of the probables are. So I gave a chance here to the 12 horses that I think potentially could be in the field, and I kind of want to get your opinion, Hawkins. I think everybody will agree here on the first 5. Nature Strip, upcoming barrier trial, obviously needed, but $4 in the market right now. These are courtesy of our friends at Sportsbet. Classique Legend at $6. Rothfire, who we will talk about later on the show, at $6. Guy Trash at $7, and Bivouac at $13. I think those are the 5 probably big candidates in the market and potentials for it. Anything you disagree with there?
Well, given the way that the race is formulated, 4 of those horses are confirmed to start. Nature Strip, as you said, has to barrier trial on Monday, but I think he'll pass that no problem. So the first 4 already have slots. Bivouac, extremely likely to have a slot, depending on the weekend's racing. Trekking actually races Friday night Australian time. He races in the Group 1 Moya Stakes. So Trekking may take Godolphin's slot away from Bivouac, but at this stage you'd be thinking Bivouac gets the slot. And if Trekking was to somehow win tonight and take that spot, then I think that Bivouac would get someone else's slot. So I don't think there's any concern about Bivouac not lining up.
Yeah, and Trekking, last time we checked in June, was $13 in the market, now above $30. Still a chance, obviously. You mentioned the path for Trekking to make the field, but I think Bivouac, the best of the Godolphin runners. And now, a lot of these are the horses that I like. Now, obviously, this is a race very similar in the U.S. to the Pegasus, where there are slots, or even Woodbine is doing a harness race this weekend that has a similar thing where 11 of the 12 slots are owned slots, and they can figure out deals for the horses. But here's who I'd like to see anyway, and obviously last time we checked in, Alligator Blood was one of the favorites potentially in this field, and now the market is definitely cooled, and the stock of Alligator Blood has cooled. But looking at these 7, obviously I'm a big fan of North Pacific, who we'll be talking about later on in the show. Anybody stand out here as a potential even pick for the race from your standpoint?
Well, I mean, firstly, as you say, it's all about who's going to get a run. Behemoth is guaranteed a run this week. Farnan's guaranteed a run. There are still a few slots up for grabs. I think Hot Brian Her, we'll talk about her in the Golden Pendant, but I think she's going to be a chance. Tefane's obviously got a run as well. Alligator Blood, the reason that he's sort of fallen out of favour is because they've had those issues with him and the Magic Millions Guineas. The owner's now taking it to court. I think that if it was probably the top 12 sprinters, you'd probably see Alligator Blood there. And I mean, it still wouldn't surprise if he got a slot late, but their main aim is to get to the Golden Eagle later in the month, which is also another big prize money race purely for 4-year-olds. So, look, for me at the moment, I'm actually starting to warm to Behemoth just because he's got the recent form on the board. He's won his last 2 at Group 1 level, and he's always had plenty of talent, but he's finally switched on this prep. And if there is the speed which is anticipated, he'll be just off that speed and I think rattling home. So for me, at this stage, I'd say the Behemoth, $15 would be nice, but we'll see how it plays out. A very interesting 3 weeks to come in the next little while.
Yeah, and some horses that always seem to show up on this race that I wouldn't call out. Santa Ana Lane will somehow end up in this race. I don't know. That's just my gut feeling that somehow Santa Ana Lane is. And obviously we don't have a mare in here that's won Mr. Champagne some money in the past. Fasica is also a horse that, in a perfect world we'd love to see run in this, but maybe not in the form that she's been previously.
Well, Fasica is going to the Premier Stakes, which is one of the main lead-ups to the Everest. So she's going to try and get a slot, and whether she does or not will depend on that run in the Premier. I think there are a couple of interesting ones. Santa Ana Lane, I think, is meant to run in the Gilgai Stakes, which is at Flemington next weekend. If he runs well there, they'll probably snap him up. And I must say there is one that's going to come really from left field. I want to talk about it when we get to the Golden Pendant, but there is one horse at the moment who would be a big price, who I reckon might get a slot, but not because I think she would win, but because of her connections with a couple of the slot holders. We'll get to the Golden Pendant, and I'll raise it then.
That is foreshadowing, as Mr. Champagne always likes to say. And we've talked about a couple of the races, but we've got a big card on Friday night here in the States, Saturday in Australia at Rosehill. And we want to get into the discussion on the Quaddie. And obviously that Quaddie will kick off in race number 6, which is the Group 2 Shannon Stakes, 3-year-olds and up, going 1,500 meters. Right now the expectation for the track is a good 4, and we've got a field of 14 here as on this first page. I Am Superman, one of the favorites in this one for the Snowdens, and we'll go to page 2 here, and you'll see that there's a full field of 13, I should say. Subpoena is scratched, and actually we'll talk about Subpoena later on here in the sequence, but obviously, we've put together some Quaddies here, and I want to start with Mr. Champagne because I think he might be out on a limb that I would love to talk about here in his Quaddie, starting off going 3 deep.
First of all, I have a question. There is a Peter and a Paul. Is there a Mary?
There is no Mary as far as I'm aware, actually. I'll
JD, that is what we in the business call low-hanging fruit. And I took it and I grabbed a big chunk out of it.
That was you out in right field. That's a Peter, Paul, and Mary song. Okay. So there you go.
It's one of my father's favorites. I grew up with it. Just saying. There's a 60-year-old man inside of me that fights to get out and sometimes succeeds. Anyway, going back to the reason people actually watch this show, or so I would like to think, I don't like I Am Superman at all in this spot. I think I Am Superman is absolutely a bet against. If you look at Australian past performances, which are available courtesy of the fine folks at Sky Racing World, you see speed ratings. I love these. These are incredibly accurate, I've found. They know their stuff, and they're a very good handicapping tool. I think it's going to take a speed rating somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to maybe 103, 104 to win this race. I Am Superman has not run a triple-digit speed figure recently, nor has he beaten group-level competition. This is a salty field for the level. I'm going elsewhere, and I'm going to try to beat him. My top selection, JD, is a horse that you hate. You absolutely hate this horse. Not just in this race. I think you may actually have a personal grudge against this horse from the last time we talked Australian racing with Candace Hare. I see your hand is raised, and just to give a friendly little recap, you did not use number 1 Tie Zone a couple starts back, and Candace tried really, really hard to steer you in the right direction. Now, I didn't use Tie Zone either, fair play here, but you're supposed to be the Australian expert. You said, oh, no, I don't like Tie Zone. And Tie Zone didn't just win. Tie Zone won as much the best. So, JD, really quick rebuttal from you. Go ahead.
I don't hate Tie Zone. I hate Tie Zone second up in this spot. I want that to be clear. I want that to be very clear. But Andrew, why do you like Tie Zone?
I love Tie Zone second off the bench. Won a Group 1 before going to the sidelines, as we've mentioned. I think he's in line to take a big step forward. Now, JD can tell you a little bit about the morning line and why 18-1 may not necessarily be the price you're going to get in the American markets. Having said that, Tie Zone, I think, is going to be an inflated price because I do think people are going to bet I Am Superman. Now, I'll also use 2 others in this race. Number 13, Just Thinkin', is my second choice. Was not disgraced last time out when second in a Group 3 over soft going. 2 for 3 at this distance and has some 2019 races that would absolutely make him a contender in this spot. I'll also use number 9, Rio Dini. Returned for the first start since January. Really long layoff by Australia standards. Should be much, much, much tighter here. Gets a weight break for many of these. Has every right to improve. I had to use that one as well. I'd go 1, 13, and 9 in race number 6, the Shannon Stakes. JD, go wherever you like. Those are the 3 that I'm running with. And I think this ticket has the potential to pay a lot of money if this sequence plays out the way I think it might.
Well, there's Tyzone on another one of the tickets here on this show, and obviously, since you said that ticket's not mine, I think we'll go to our guest, the other Andrew here, as he's going 6 deep in this first leg. And obviously, you respect Tyzone here, but you're going 6 deep. Who do you like as your top choice?
Look, I thought it was imperative to get through this first leg. The Shannon Stakes traditionally is a race that can be very difficult and can play quite strange. It used to be a different card. The Golden Rose used to be earlier in the spring, and so the Shannon Stakes used to be the feature, and it was always horses trying to get into the Epsom, which is what a lot of these are trying to do. They're trying to get into the big mile feature next weekend. So a few horses in this race tend to be not entirely wound up, and sometimes it's a race that can play out quite strange. Name for a horse who actually was sold to the States. I think stood in the States for quite some time, Shannon. The way I looked at the race was that there looks to be quite a bit of speed. Just Thinking will go forward. There was some other speed in there. I'll have to go back. Quackerjack will definitely go forward, and Quackerjack, JD knows that I've been a Quackerjack fan, and he's burnt me now, so I've jumped off the Quackerjack bandwagon. So the way I was looking at it was thinking that sort of wave just behind the speed is probably going to be the way to go. I think that Stradbroke form has to be definitely considered. Both of them didn't run that badly first up, Tyzone and Nicanova. So I've included them. However, my top selection is actually going to be Rio Dini. I know Champagne mentioned Rio Dini. Used to be a Kiwi filly. She came across the Tasman, joined Gay Waterhouse and Adrian Bott, and didn't look quite screwed down first up. I think second time out really should be screwed down, knowing that training combination. And Rio Dini, I think she's a nice filly. She maps really well. So for me, I'm putting the 9 Rio Dini on top. But really, for me, it's just about getting through that first leg and hoping that Quackerjack doesn't burn me this time after I've backed him the 2 times this prep already.
Yeah, and I'm going 6 deep as well, and I'm also a big Quackerjack fan, but I just can't after the last 2 performances. Not the same horse. Something might be going on. Before I go into my picks, the reason why I don't like Tyzone is really I don't like Tyzone at this stage of the career going second up. It hasn't been good. You look at the form and you see, okay, 2 wins second up in the career and 8 chances, but those were far, far back. I think really Tyzone is a play 3rd or 4th up. I'm not a big fan second up. Also, the thing that haunts me a little bit here with Tyzone, has never even tried the distance. It's not that hasn't won that at the distance, hasn't even tried the distance. This is a horse that a lot of the early career wins were 4.5 furlong races, 900 meters and 1,000 meters. So it's a big step up and a big ask here. So I'm going 6 deep, and obviously I do have a lot of respect for Rio Dini, who, if it wasn't mentioned by everybody else, I would say is on top. But I've got a horse
we can all get through. No, this is we could actually all be alive going into the last leg here, JD. This is pretty cool.
Well, I'm going to give a horse that only I have, and that would be the 14 Yamasaki. I really like the move of getting out of the race later on in the card, the Golden Pendant, and getting into this spot. I do feel like the performance last time out in the Tibby, very, very strong effort. You look back, had some excuses there and still finished second. Was a strong performance from the back of the field. Obviously pace dependent, and I will say that Quackerjack's going to try to get to the front, but I think Just Thinking is the obvious speed. Tim Clark has one direction to go, and that's to the front with Just Thinking. I think there could be enough speed to set it up for Yamazaki, and I'm gonna be that guy because I'm choosing Yamasaki, whose longest win was at 1350, who has also never tried at 1500. But I think 4th up is in much the best form that we're going to see out of the mare. So obviously also at 53, not a ton of weight here. Tyzone's at 59, so there is a weight advantage here in these group races. Apprentices are not claiming, there is a bit of a weight advantage for Yamasaki going against Taizone, even if they run similar races. So I'm 60, 5, 6, 9, 12, 13, 14. I hate the 1. I like the 9 and the 14. That's really what we can say here. Moving on to the feature, which is the Group 1 Golden Rose, 3-year-olds going 1,400 meters. Again, the track listed as a good 4, as we have a field of 9 for this one. Rothfire should be the heavy favorite, should be an odds-on choice in this field. But King's Legacy obviously had a strong 2-year-old campaign. We haven't seen it yet at 3. North Pacific has run some stellar races, and we look at the 8 and 9, Silvestri and Yardstick. And really, guys, I think both of you are going to go a very similar direction. I'm going to let our guest talk about what is one of the stars of Australian racing right now. And he's obviously singling here. So, Mr. Hawkins, take it away.
He's a very, very exciting horse, Rothfire. He's won all bar one of his starts to date. He's a gelding as well, which is exciting for Australia because it means we'll see him season upon season, and I think his appeal is only going to keep growing. His trainer, Rob Heathcote, actually took buffering to Dubai and won the Alquoz Sprint a few years back. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we see Rothfire travelling in time. He might be the type to fly the Australian flag on the world stage. But it's a great story because he wasn't fashionably bred. He wasn't a good-looking yearling to the point where he couldn't even get into a yearling sale. They wouldn't actually accept him because he didn't have a pedigree page. He just wasn't a great type. He was the type of horse who then was sold to Robert Heathcote for $10,000 Australian. So you're looking at it being about $8,000 US dollars. And then Robert Heathcote had to pay it twice because he got scammed by Nigerian scammers. But he's not complaining now. The horse has won almost $800,000. And, well, if he wins this and then goes on to win the Everest, look, it's the best $20,000 you've ever spent. So, look, he's a very talented horse. We saw how talented he was in Queensland. Queensland's sort of the third racing tier here in Australia. And so even though he was performing at that level and performing very strongly, you still want to see them bring it to Sydney or to Melbourne. And he did that last time out with one of the best wins you'll see. Farnan did go very, very hard on the lead. With controversial circumstances there, but Rothfire was just able to sit off him and just exploded away. It was a fantastic performance. He's proven at the 7 furlongs at the 1,400 meters, and I just think Rothfire wins. I can't find a case to beat him, and given that I hate taking chalk, I'll try all day long to get an odds-on favourite beaten, but I just can't make a case to beat him.
And if there's anything that is consistent about this show, is I will make a case on beating chalk. Now, mind you, I did single Rothfire in the Quaddie last time against Farnan, so I took the $4 and it paid off royally here. But I have a case for 2 other horses. I am going to include Rothfire, but I have the 3 Mama Reagan and the 5 North Pacific. I look
Andrew, tell me when it's safe to come out.
I will.
Thank you.
I look at the one time that Rothfire got beaten, and it was a pace compromise situation. I look at the 9 in here, Yardstick. Yardstick is a very, very quick horse, and Tim Clark is drawn right to the inside of Rothfire. I think there is a possibility that we could see Yardstick and Rothfire get in a bit of a battle up front, and if that happens, I think North Pacific and Magma Reagan are going to be the 2 horses that will benefit the most from it. So obviously Yardstick, Tim Clark, I mean, I mentioned this the last race. He's got one direction to go with the horse he's on, and that's straight to the front for Gay Waterhouse and Adrian Bott. So I'm looking at this from the standpoint of if Rothfire is going to get beaten, there's 2 chances, and my Quaddie will pay tremendously if that happens. And if it's any other horse in this race that beats Rothfire, I'm going to be very sad. I am a big Rothfire fan. I'm rooting for Rothfire, but I do think there's a couple circumstances there that could play out that we could see somebody else step back in form. I will say Mama Reagan's, obviously just got that one win, and it was such an impressive effort as a 2-year-old. Hasn't really run back to that race. Runs back to that race. I mean, potentially in the conversation at double-digit odds. Okay, Andrew, it's over. You can come out now, and you've got a single.
Okay. It's not like Rothfire can't lose. Kidding aside, if you're going against Rothfire, I get it. Having said that, he would need to regress, and not by a length or two. He would need to regress significantly, and it is likely that another runner in this field would need to fire a career-best shot. Not saying it's impossible. I'm saying it's very, very unlikely, and this also allows me to be able to use this ticket to be able to extract a little bit of value out of Rothfire on the win end because, spoiler alert, it's a $36 ticket that I'm putting out there. Rothfire gets home. We beat a couple of favorites. I've turned Rothfire into a 6-1 shot. I understand that's not necessarily the sexiest thing in the world, but from a mathematical standpoint, that checks out. Rothfire is a single for me, and there is another reason why I am singling Rothfire from a ticket construction standpoint that we'll get to in just a little bit. Now that is called foreshadowing, kids.
As we move on to race number 3, as we mentioned, this is another really strong race. I will admit there is a mistake in the graphic. It is the Group 2 Golden Pennant going 1,400 meters for 3-year-olds and up, fillies and mares. The favorite in the market, and Mr. Hawkins mentioned her in the lead up with the talk about the Everest, is Hot Brian Herr, who right now in the market is about $250 in Australia, draws the 15 barrier, so interesting barrier for James McDonald to work out of as we move to the second page of graphics here. And obviously we mentioned Yamasaki running earlier in the card, and Rocha Clock actually will run in the race that follows this one, so 2 scratches, 11 and 13 out of this one. We have no emergencies, but we do have one final page, and that will be air-to-air, drawing barrier for number 15. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it off here. I really do think this is a wide open race, and I'm going to go 5 deep here. Obviously, I completely respect Hot Brian Herr. The barrier, that's my one concern, going to be all the way on the outside of this field. So the one horse that I want to spotlight and highlight is Jen Rules. I think Jen Rules is in great form. I think Jen Rules, first up, really put out a solid performance, only losing by about 3/4 of a length to Hot Brian Herr. I do think that Jen Rules can improve from that effort. If there's one thing you can say lately in the career of Jen Rules, and Mr. Champagne always gets on me for this, I tend to like hangers. I see a lot of value and chance is on horses that get right near the lead, and he always has that very handy for the podcast.
Props. I'm like Carrot Top. I have a chest of props right off screen.
And you see with Jen Rules, you dig into the past performances, and the last few losses, 3/4 of a length, half a length, 1 length, 1/3 of a length. Jen Rules has been hanging, but I do think has a shot here. So I'm trying to extract as much value as possible, as Champagne said, because I'm going out on a limb in leg 4 to help with that. But I'm 2, 4, 5, 7, and 10, and I'm going to let Mr. Champagne go next because he either has a great opinion on this race or no opinion based on the ticket that he submitted.
Yeah. Boom. I'm pressing it. I'm pressing the all button of glory in this race. Now, one quick thing. Because of the scratches, my ticket actually is a little bit cheaper than I initially thought. So, woohoo! Yay, my bank account. Now, I respect number 2, Hot Brian Herr. She could absolutely win this race. She's certainly talented enough to do so. The barrier is a concern, And I also think she may have to work a bit to get to the front end. While she's talented, her speed ratings don't exactly dwarf those of her opposition in here. This is a darn good Group 2 event. Can't exactly blame JD for calling it a Group 1 in the graphic, and I'm not even going to get on him for that. JD, you get a break from me for that. Just saying. Now, you mentioned Jen Rules, and you mentioned that Jen Rules has a history of hanging. I know this because she has been on my ticket almost every single time I've looked at Australia and seen her running, because I'm like, okay, she's competitive user, she's competitive user, she's competitive user. Dream horse to own, just doesn't always get the money. Now, with Hot Brian Her in this race, and I think a vulnerable favorite, the question is, what other direction can you go? Well, there's 14 other horses in the body of this field before scratches. To me, they all look sort of the same. I am banking on Hot Brian Her getting beat by the barrier draw and the race shape, and I'm just hoping we get some sort of a price home, because if we do, a lot of tickets go up in smoke, and that may very well open up some 3-for-4 scenarios going into the last leg as well, given the quirkiness of the North American pools and the fact that not all combinations are always covered. So I'm hitting the all button here. It sounds like we're actually all in agreement that this is a very wide open race. So I got to tell you, I feel a little bit of comfort in that.
Yeah, and we both mentioned respecting Hot Brian Her, and I think Mr. Hawkins does really respect this horse overall, but I don't see this horse on your ticket, Andrew.
I like your gumption.
Well, my thinking is that if I am going to get through those first two legs, there's every chance it could be chalk and chalk without going too deep into the last leg. That I think is going to be chalk as well. So here's where I need to get a price if I'm going to get any sort of return on the ticket. And I just think that if it was to be Hot Brian Her, Rothfire into Hot Brian Her into the final favourite, who we'll talk about in a second, there's just no value there. So for me, I thought it's worthwhile taking her on and just trying to construct a ticket that would cash in if she was to get beaten. That said, I did mention before that I thought there was going to be an interesting Everest horse coming out of this that wasn't Hot Brian Her. And then, funnily enough, it's actually the horse that you guys have both been talking about, Jen Rules. Now, I'll explain my rationale here. She's owned by Max Whitby and by Neil Werrett. She races in the colours of Neil Werrett, with the green and the yellow, with the armbands being Max Whitby's colours. Now, they have a slot left in the Everest, and they haven't chosen their horse yet. I think that there's a chance that they could go for any of these horses, a Santa Ana Lane, like you mentioned before, JD. But if Jen Rules was to perform here, I reckon there's a chance she'll see her in the Everest. So that's my call at the moment. She's not even in the market for the Everest, but I reckon it's very, very possible she ends up in the Everest, especially should she perform well here. So that's my sort of hot take. I have included Jen Rules on my ticket. It is one of these races where it is wide open. I included Positive Pace, the 3. The 5 is some sort of chance as well. That being Outback Barbie, who is a frustrating horse, an incredibly frustrating horse. But she is talented. Again, it just depends what happens in the run. Rachel King riding tremendously at the moment, so hoping she can get a run there. The 6 with though is the one I'm really excited about, Evelina. Really liked her run last time out. It was a high pressure race, but it may end up being the same with Hot Brian Her having to come across from that gate. If so, I think Evelina can finish off over the top. So she'd be the one I'm most excited about. But yeah, let's see what happens with Jen Rules, and if she runs well, you heard it here first about her being a potential Everest contender.
Yeah, so Jen Rules, $16 in the market right now in the race. Evelina, the other horse you mentioned liking, Andrew, $26.50. I think Mr. Champagne will take either of those choices with his all button of glory. As we move on to the final leg of the race, which is a benchmark 88. The Quakeling Handicap, 3-year-olds and up, going 1,400 meters. We have a field of 12 signed on for this one. And we'll see on the outside here, I shouldn't say on the outside, but the second page of the race. And really what's interesting here is myself and Mr. Hawkins have singles, and we're going to start with Andrew because he is going 4 deep in this spot, and Andrew Champagne, I should say. And Mr. Champagne, the floor is yours.
Well, I'm actually using both of your singles without revealing who's singled what. My top selection is number 5, Masked Crusader, and I think this is a logical favorite. Should sit a prime stalking trip just off the speed and should have first run late. Logical favorite, must use third off the bench. There's a lot to like. He's going to be a pretty short price. However, I don't think Masked Crusader towers over this group. My second selection, a bit of a price. That's number 10, Mira Vision. Second off the bench, has a couple of races from earlier this year that would make her very competitive. They tried a couple of Group 3 races with this one, and that's just too tough for her. She's just not a Group 3 horse. This is the right level for her, and I think we're going to get a little bit of a price. I'll also use number 7, Dancing Gidget, and number 8, Rocha Clock. Those would be my Bs if you're doing a grid structure. I would go 5 and 10 as A's, 7 and 8 as B's, or you can play my entire ticket for $38 minus scratches. I think it comes out to 31 something if I'm doing the math in my head right. But at any rate, I think this is a really good sequence, one where some favorites appear very vulnerable. It's going to be a good-sized pool. Remember, 20-cent minimum, so you can get a lot of coverage for not a lot of money. Regardless of your opinions, make sure you get involved. You know the three of us will be. And again, good sequence coming up at Rosehill. It's Australia A in your ADW of choice. And now I'm going to turn things over to the two people that actually have spines to single in the last leg of this sequence. JD, Mr. Hawkins, take your pick. Who's going first?
I'm going to go ahead and take it because I am singling Mira Vision. And I'm really looking at this, and again, the pandemic makes you say some things that don't make a lot of sense, but you have to bear with me here.
That's your excuse?
No, I'm going back to the Hawkesbury Guineas, which was a very strong performance in Miravision 2 back, which actually took place at Rosehill because of the pandemic and was a really brave effort. I really think that this is a horse that this might be a little above the scope for Miravision, but this is a hard-trying horse, and I really like this spot, the race shape. I could see a lot of speed leading this in. I don't think Masked Crusader is an absolute lock here. I will say Miravision right now is $13 in the market, but the Stones, I think they have a good horse with a good heart here. This is definitely a horse that's a Ricky Bobby horse, first or last, but tries really, really hard. So I'm going a little bit outside the grain here with Miravision. Again, gets back to that Hawkesbury Guineas race 2 back. That race is good enough to beat this field. But Mr. Hawkins, I often on this show accuse Mr. Champagne of being the Andrew that likes to eat chalk, but you are going to here in the final race.
Well, that's the reason that I've left Hot Brian Her out in leg 3 so that I can eat the chalk here. Masked Crusader, I do think, is a horse who is heading to the highest level. And I still believe that, even after his 2 beaten runs this preparation. He's had things just go against him. He's had bad draws. He isn't the fastest to begin, which is always a bit of an issue for him. And look, he's run well in defeat. I think that now with him getting up to 1,400 metres is going to be absolutely crucial. He's drawn better as well, so he should be able to settle that a little bit closer. I think he will just stalk the speed. And if Masked Crusader is the horse that I think he is, I'd really hope he's winning this and winning this comfortably on Friday night your time. So I've got everything crossed that he is able to bring it home a winner. But again, that's why I've had to go against Hot Brian Her in leg 3 and just hope that Masked Crusader is able to bring the Quaddie home after there has been a shock defeat of Hot Brian Her in the Golden Pendant.
Yep. So Andrew Hawkins' ticket. $6 based on the 20% in the States. Obviously, it's a 20-cent base wager here in the U.S., so we would say 20% in Australia. So if you want to play him for 100%, that would be $30, which might be a good investment there for the $1 base. Mr. Champagne will have to get an abacus out for what his do you have it? Because you were wavering on your math before. Do you have what your ticket is? It's not 36.
I can look, and don't worry, I'm not using my Thurby is not a word pad here. Give me just a moment, and I will be more than happy to tell you exactly how much this costs. We're down to, 13 horses in leg 3?
Yeah, yes, 13 horses in leg 3. I have an $18 ticket for 20%, $90 if you're playing for 100%. And Mr. Champagne?
I was right. I did not take a single math class in college, but I was right on this. $31.20. Kidding aside, I sent in my tickets before I realized, wait a minute, some of these horses are cross-entered and there's going to be a couple of scratches. So barring any further scratches, $31.20. One of the reasons that I really like playing Australia is that 20-cent minimum, which I understand may sound like a turnoff and may sound like, oh, aren't you going to get less money? Everyone's playing for the 20-cent minimum, at least 95% of the time. You might get some people playing for 50 cents or playing for $1, whatever. But the 20-cent minimum allows you a chance to dive in and get coverage where you feel you need it. Now, if Rothfire wins, we get a price home in leg number 3. We beat the favorite in leg number 1. I'm 4 deep for a nice score. And again, 3 out of 4 is a very real thing. It has happened to me. That was the source of one of my biggest scores of the year to this point. So get involved. That's the important thing. It's a great card at Rosehill, Australia A in your ADW of choice. So now we are headed over to the final thought section of this program. And as you may have seen down on the bottom of the screen, we have an ad for quote unquote sad Arizona racing news. I don't know if that's where JD is going for his final thought in this segment, but I got to tell you, I would not be surprised.
All right, I'm gonna give 2 thoughts here, and one of them is gonna be sad Arizona racing news. So, if you've been following the saga of Arizona racing and the battle between Turf Paradise, the main track here in Arizona, and the Horsemen, and the $2.3 million that the Horsemen's purse has that Turf Paradise feels should be theirs and under their control, well, they have been sending very feisty letters at each other this week.
Strongly worded letters, too.
So Turf Paradise sent what is the 3rd letter of the sequence, and they have, I believe I mentioned this on last week's show, that they had asked the Horsemen's organization to disband and create a new one and get a new board. Well, that demand seems to be gone from the list of demands. So now the demand is give us our $2.3 million back. And basically that's the main demand. And it's actually now the secondary demand is to temporarily allow advanced deposit wagering and the OTBs to be open until June of next year. To get that on the books, because right now, if there's no racing in Arizona, Arizona will cease to be a state where you can bet on horse racing as of 12/31/2020. So we have to get some races on the books for 2021, and until we do that, this could be a very sad show. Now, mind you, because of the ongoing Stronach Monarch dispute with the state of Arizona, we will not be betting on the Preakness in the state of Arizona. And obviously Santa Anita opens this weekend. We won't be betting on that. There's lots of things that we won't be betting on, Andrew. But you know what we can bet on? And this is just the Prince of Wales is on Tuesday. The second leg of the Canadian Triple Crown is on Tuesday at Fort Erie. I want to make sure everybody knows that's watching this. It's on Tuesday. It's going to be a great card from Fort Erie, and I'm really excited to see. We don't have the draw as of yet. We're recording on Thursday night. I'll have social media takes on it. I'll probably record some videos because I'm really excited for the second leg of the Canadian Triple Crown, the Prince of Wales, taking place on Tuesday at Fort Erie, Mr. Champagne.
Andrew, how depressing does this Arizona situation sound to you from afar?
Oh, it sounds very depressing. And the other thing, too, is Turf Paradise is one of the tracks that Sky Racing down here would take of a morning. So all of those punters at 9 a.m. Sydney time who are tuning into Sky Racing, they've been very disappointed not to have their Turf Paradise to bet on. There have been quarter horses. There has been quarter horse action on Sky since around the time that COVID kicked off. So probably around the time of late March, early April. But yeah, it's been something that I know people in Australia have been actually affected by the fact that Turf Paradise hasn't been on. So who'd have thought?
One thing I will say is the first time that Sky picked up a quarter horse race that was 100 yards in length, I enjoyed watching my Australian horse racing Twitter just absolutely freak out of what are we watching. And then I had to tell people that there are occasions where thoroughbreds here run 2 furlong races at certain race courses, and that blows everybody's mind away. I will say, Andrew, that one of the other things that I'm impacted with by this Monarch signal dispute is I do not have Melbourne Racing Club right now either. That's just a weird thing where a dispute with something in the States is impacting my ability to bet on part of Australia. So anytime you mention Caulfield, I just get really, really sad because I cannot bet on that track.
Well, that's the thing. You guys can't bet on Caulfield. You can't bet on Sandown and Mornington as well. They're the Melbourne Racing Club's tracks because basically what happened was, I think it'd be about 18 months ago now, the Melbourne Racing Club took their rights back. So Sky Racing has most of the rights for Australian clubs and Australian tracks, and they've taken the rights away, the Melbourne Racing Club, to ship them out themselves and create more of a premium. So it's helped them in that they've been able to make a real profit when they've been able to sell their rights for their big races, the Caulfield Cup, the Caulfield Guineas. They're able to sell them into Hong Kong and into Japan and make a lot of money, especially last year with the Caulfield Cup going to a Japanese horse. But it does affect American customers. I know I speak to Candice Hare quite a bit, and she's always a bit of a blank when I say, there's the Underwood Stakes at Caulfield this weekend, and she's like, yep, I can't watch it. And she's obviously right at the forefront of the action. So it just shows you how it does affect the American wagering market, especially for the next few weeks where Caulfield's races last weekend and this weekend are really going to have an influence on the markets going forward over the spring.
And obviously anything on Sky, I getting picture perfect HD here, and even if this signal dispute gets sorted out, that's regional just to my state. It's still very grainy standard definition for Caulfield, so it's actually tough to watch. And we don't have a way of watching it in HD because there's not a Sky Racing World website or many other things. Obviously, I use RTN, so I've got my set-top box devices where I can pull up the Australia feed. But Mr. Champagne, you've been a great sport over the course of this show. I know we got you into Australian racing because of the pandemic. This is your first kind of toe back into the water, but what are your final thoughts for today's show?
I'm really excited about this card at Rosehill, guys. It's Australia A, as mentioned in your ADW of choice. Remember, there's several Australia tracks, so make sure you're betting the right one. Starts with race number 6. I'll be covering this sequence on Twitter. I'll be giving out some thoughts as I see fit. There will be a couple of other cards that I'm looking forward to this weekend as well. I'm in the Daily Gallop contest. I'll be playing Santa Anita on Saturday. I'll be keeping an eye on Pimlico as well for the Preakness. We may or may not have a special guest next week for the Preakness episode, and it may or may not be somebody that JD and I are both very excited about, and you may or may not want to keep an eye on our Twitter accounts to see who it is. Anyway, I'm also going to be taking a close look at the NFL for week 3. I haven't had a chance yet to write up my previews, but 7-1 through 2 weeks over on andrewchampagne.com. It's free analysis, 4 picks and plays every week. I'll also give out some daily fantasy sports plays as well. Had a lot of members of the Dallas Cowboys last week in that incredible comeback win over the Falcons and Atlanta, so that allowed us to make a little bit of money. Hopefully we can keep the good mojo going. Unfortunately, ending on a little bit of a sour note for those of us of a certain fandom persuasion. Rest in peace, Road Warrior Animal.
Here. And Mr. Hawkins, obviously, Andrew mentioned at the top of the show, one of the best follows on Twitter if you're a fan of Hong Kong, if you're a fan of Australian racing, Andrew NJ Hawkins. So kind of a combination. Give your final thoughts that you want to say to the public here on today's show, and then some places that we can find your work and follow you more than your Twitter account.
Well, look, thank you both for having me on. That's I'm now excited to see who this guest is for the Preakness. You've got me reeled in for that for sure. To keep an eye out for that. Look, it's such a great time in Australia. Australian racing year round is a strong product, but these weeks between sort of the start of October until the end of Melbourne Cup week, which is around the 7th of November this year, it's prime time to just if you've never watched Australian racing before, it's the perfect time to take a first leap in. Obviously, with the seasons being different, we see our first 2-year-olds going to the track at the moment, and see some stallions that you guys would be familiar with, the likes of Frosted had his first runner the other day in Australia. And so it is a really great time to get involved. And as you said, there are plenty of wagering options. You've got plenty of chances to make money, but also just having that 20-cent base really does help and make it a really attractive product. So definitely take some time out. It's a great time as well for you guys as Friday night. It's just perfectly placed. So for me, I'm currently working for ANZ Bloodstock News. They're an Australian New Zealand publication. We're doing some exciting stuff there. They're owned by Racing Post, so very much in that international sphere. I'm doing some stuff with the Hong Kong Jockey Club as well. So look, you'll see me all over social media in different places. Often, as I think Champagne mentioned before, just having strong opinions about things and really just making sure that people know it.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously Australia here, a 7-day-a-week product now. And the one new thing that's happened in the last few months is we have the Australian harness racing as well. Sky Racing World has put that up. And last night and the night before, primetime coverage on TVG nationally here in the States in HD, the harness action in Australia. So we're getting everything that Sky offers in Australia other than the dogs. The dogs are not coming. We're done with greyhound racing in the States, unfortunately.
I don't blame you, and to be frank, it's always been very weird to us in Australia that we've had somewhere in Florida. I know we've taken their feed, and they've got. I mean, apart from an incredible race caller down there, an incredible announcer who every time the lure would run would start screaming at the top of his lungs. There wasn't much about the Florida greyhounds that really appealed. So look, I'm glad you're getting a harness racing though, because there is some top class harness racing coming up from Australia over the coming weeks as well. So plenty of betting options, and it just shows how global a world we are in these days.
No kidding. There's a lot going on, and the most important thing, find ways to get involved. I was a convert to the Australian racing scene earlier this year when COVID wiped out a lot of different racetracks, and I started looking and go, wait a minute, these horses run every 2 weeks. There are 16, 18, 20 horse fields. You can play for 20 cents. I could give this a shot. It's a lot of fun, and it's a really cool alternative for people who might be looking for something a little bit different than what you see during the day at the East Coast and West Coast. So, Andrew, we thank you so much for coming on with us. This was fantastic. Best of luck this weekend at Rosehill.
Cheers, guys, and hopefully chat to you soon. It's been great.
Awesome. JD, do you want to hit him with the catchphrase?
Just because I had a great show last week and really the Woodbine Mile, Starship Jubilee did a great job. I'm happy to do that. And I will say, please, everyone, stay off the beaches.
What a rush!